So the Crusades. People commonly think that Christian armies invaded peaceful Muslim-held territory with racist raping and pillaging to gain wealth and favor from God. They were immoral and sparked Muslim hatred for the West. Okay, so it's a fact. The word crusade nowadays has a bad rap. It didn't 20 or 30 years ago, but now it does. Radical Muslims use it to label the Christian West as worthy of destruction. This is some of their argument, some of their apologetic. You know of Christian organizations and schools that have actually changed their names or their mascots to avoid the negative associations with this word. So how about you? Do you feel defensive about the Crusades? Yeah, I kind of do. All these things are a mixed bag, okay? They're complex issues. They can't be simplified into something like this, and I think maybe that's your point, Les. They're more complex than what they seem, and to appreciate some of the nuances, I think is helpful.
Islamophobic Christians seem to forget that time when they had the Crusades. You can't blame a whole religion over the actions of a few, or Christians will have to own up to all the death calls during the Crusades. Funny how when the Christians are killed, it's terrorism, yet when Christians wiped entire races from the earth, it was called the Crusades. Okay, first of all, Islam is not a race. Second, look, I know schools have stopped teaching history in an even remotely objective manner, but here's a fun fact. The Crusades happened because of Islam, because Islam is not a religion of peace. The first crusade began in 1095, but it wasn't because Christians were looking to pick a fight with their neighbors and baptize the whole face of the planet. The first crusade was called only after 4 centuries of Muslim aggression. The first crusade was called 460 years after the first Christian city was overrun by Muslim armies. 457 years after Jerusalem was conquered by Muslims. 453 years after Egypt was taken. 443 years after Italy was plundered, 427 years after Muslims first laid siege to the Christian capital of Constantinople, 380 years after Muslims conquered Spain, 363 years after France was first attacked, and 249 years after the capital of Christendom, Rome itself, was sacked by a Muslim army. The First Crusade only came after centuries of church burnings, murder, enslavement, and forced conversions of Christians, all at the hands of Islam. And by the time the Crusades finally began, Muslim armies had conquered 2/3 of the Christian world. This is a holy war, one that Islam started, indeed, one that Islam views as never having stopped in the first place.
So I also found something from a historian theologian. I won't read the whole thing. It says, the Crusades were not simply unprovoked aggression. They were defensive moves to protect Christendom from Muslim invasion. Muslims had been attacking Christians for more than 450 years before the First Crusade. Further, the idea that the Crusades also sparked Muslim hatred of the West is an historical falsehood. The Crusades did not do much damage to the Islamic forces, and not much notice was given to the Crusades by Muslims for several centuries. Muslims did not even seem to take an active interest in the Crusades until the early 20th century. Now there were 7 or 9 Crusades. This is all focusing on the first one, which Pope Urban launched. They were different from each other. And depending on which one you look at, you can justify or condemn. There was, I think, the Fourth Crusade that was used as an excuse to actually attack Istanbul and rape and pillage other Christians. And so, as we said at the beginning, this is a mixed bag. But, as Les pointed out, the characterization that this was, you know, an example of Christian bigotry and exercise of cruelty doesn't really describe things accurately. So I think that it's fair to say that the First Crusade, at least, was a defensive move. And then you've got sinful human beings taking advantage of some of the opportunities for themselves also. So, questions for the group now. How do you think the Crusades were motivated by positive biblical ideas, if at all? What non-Christian ideas and practices may also have been involved? And what parallel modern examples might come to mind? The point I want to wrap up with is that this is a mixed bag situation, that there were some commendable motives, if you say, to defend the innocent people that they believe were being abused, to defend Europe from the expansion of Muslim aggression. But some of the ways that this has gone about are arguably non-biblical and immoral. So you can't, a blanket indictment doesn't seem appropriate.